U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services announced it will be eliminating the option for many immigrants seeking a green card to complete that process without having to leave the U.S. Now, in most cases, immigrants will be required to return to their home countries in order to apply for a green card or permanent U.S. residency through an American consulate overseas.
America, for 60 years, if you were living in the United States legally on a student visa, a work visa, even a tourist visa, you got sponsored for a green card. You could apply for it right here in the United States. You didn't have to leave the country. You filed the paperwork, you stayed, you waited. 822,000 people did exactly that last year alone. As of about a little over 48 hours ago, depending on when you're watching this, most of them would have been told to go home first. But here's what every outlet covering this story is skipping entirely. The man who signed this memo, USCIS Director Joseph Edlow, didn't create this policy in a weekend. This was the third major immigration restriction that he signed in 7 months. 3 pieces, one direction, each one building on the piece before it, and nobody's showing you the connection. Before I get there, there's a group of people this memo hits that nobody's talking about. People who followed every single rule this country ever gave them, and if they go home to apply the way that this memo says, they never may come back in.
A major shakeup is coming for green card applicants here in the United States, and this is important. The Trump administration says anybody in the U.S. who wants a green card has to return to their home country to apply. DHS says the new policy will allow immigration, quote, to function as the law intended instead of incentivizing loopholes. But with 500,000 people applying for green cards from here in the U.S. each year, critics say it's just Trump's latest immigration crackdown.
500,000 a year. The most important question that Anchor didn't answer is what happens to the hundreds of thousands of cases that were already filed before this week and before the situation ever happened? The question has no official answer yet, and the silence around it tells you more than what the memo does. What is up, guys? Tyson De La Cruz here. Thank you so much for rocking with me. Here's what Policy Memorandum PM 6020199 actually does. And I'm going to make it incredibly simple. And there is a lot of legal language in this document that was written for lawyers, not for people. Before this memo, the process worked like this, you guys. You were in the United States legally. Your employer or American spouse wants to sponsor you for what's known as a green card. You file a 485 form. You pay the fees, around $300 to $500, depending. You stay in the country while the USCIS processes your case. You keep working if your visa allows it. The whole thing happens on American soil. That process, called adjustment of status, has been available in some form since Congress was created in 1952. What Edlow's memo does is tell the USCIS officers to deny most of those applications. Instead of processing them here, officers are now directed to send people back to their home country to apply at a U.S. consulate. In the official language, adjustment of status is now an extraordinary form of relief, not the normal path here. And 820,000 people learned that in less than 48 hours. Who's still protected here? H-1B and L-1 visa holders have what's called dual intent. They're absolutely fine. Refugees and asylees are protected. Certain immediate relatives of American citizens have particular protections, but F1 students, B1, B2 tourists, and business visitors, O1 specialty workers, they are in a completely different situation today than they were last week.
Students, people who came to the United States as students, there could be people who are here as temporary workers, and even tourists. And here's what an official with USCIS, this is the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, this is what a spokesperson for that agency, which is under under DHS, this is what they said with regards to this new memo that has been really getting quite some attention. They said, we are returning to the original intent of the law to ensure aliens navigate our nation's immigration systems properly. From now on, an alien who is in the U.S. temporarily and wants a green card must return to their home country to apply, except for in extraordinary circumstances. I started to speak with immigration attorneys about this earlier today to get an idea of what those extraordinary circumstances could be. And they said perhaps in instances where someone is here in the United States as a refugee, that could be seen as an extraordinary circumstance, and they may not have to return to their home country in order to apply for a green card. And for people who may not know, a green card pretty much grants permanent residency here in the United States. It does not mean that you are a U.S. citizen, but it's one step from being here in the United States temporarily to become someone who's here on a permanent basis.
And here's the honest version, at least in my opinion. Adjustment of status, as it was written in law in 1952, was always a discretionary call by the USCIS. The government never legally owed it to anyone. What changed over 60 years is that the USCIS started treating discretionary like it was automatic here. Edlow stopped doing that, and the people who plan their lives around unofficial automatic expectations are unfortunately facing the gap between what the law says and what they were potentially counting on.
Now they want to change it that for most of those people, they're going to have to go back to their country and go through consular processing, which is going to be a disaster because those consular processing cases already have backlogs of years to even get an interview.
The change could have wider impacts. The series says this includes potentially more pressure on immigration courts. Families could be separated for long periods of time, and employers may hesitate to hire or sponsor workers who could be sent abroad.
You're going to have people who are working here in the United States, even legally right now, but because they would be out of status while their green card's pending, they're going to have to go back. You're going to have people that are married may have to go back. You're going to have students, other workers, investors. It's insane.
You redirect 500,000 annual applications from a domestic USCIS office to foreign consulates that have already been running years and years behind. Where does the capacity come from? The official announcement doesn't say. And when the answer involves years, not months of waiting outside the country, that's not a procedural adjustment. That's people's lives. And here's the most important part of this memo, and it's something that isn't there. The memo says the USCIS will approve adjustments of status in extraordinary circumstances. Those two words, 4 words total, appear 4 times in the PM 602-0199. They determine who gets to stay in the United States while their case is being processed, and they are not defined anywhere in the document.
It's discretionary, right? So that's up to the officer reviewing it. Discretion is one of the hardest things to appeal because it's subjective. So now you're leaving up to these officers to make these decisions based on discretion. You're just adding more gray areas to immigration.
Trust me, you guys, immigration lawyers across the country heard the words extraordinary circumstances on Friday afternoon and immediately started billing for hours and past hours and future hours, because when those words carry the full weight of the policy and none of them are defined, the only way to get the definition is to actually litigate for it. So the people that are going to be making massive amounts of money are going to be the immigration attorneys. File a denied application, appeal to an immigration judge, have the judge write a definition that the USCIS chose not to write. That process is already starting. But here is the honest counter that nobody covered. After the memo dropped, a USCIS spokesperson released a second statement separate from the official policy release. And the second statement says something completely different about who actually gets to stay. I'm quoting this directly. People who provide an economic benefit or are in the national interest will likely be able to continue applying from within the United States. Read that again. It's not, did you follow the rules? It's not, were you on the right visa? It's, what do you bring to America? An H-1B engineer building software for American companies probably stays and applies here. AB2 tourists who marry an American citizen. The memo says, you got to go home first. That is not a cleanup memo. That is a policy statement about who America actually wants. And it was buried in the second press release that the coverage completely missed.
Honestly, I think the impact is more fear than reality. This is a sweeping executive order that is unconstitutional on its face. It is attempting to roll back over a century of legal precedent in the United States and say that if somebody is born in the United States and their parents are either undocumented or on a temporary visa here legally, certainly under the jurisdiction of the United States, that all of those children would not be born U.S. citizens. It's a really symbolic gesture. I don't think that Trump's people expected it to last very long in the courts. I think they're taking a gamble and figuring, well, best case scenario, we win in the Supreme Court someday, which is very unlikely. But worst case scenario, we still scare a lot of people. And I would add, it's scaring people who are both here with and without papers.
Doug Rand is a former Biden official. Take that for what that's worth. And I'm going to give it to you straight. The problem that he just described is mechanical. It's not political. The Trump travel ban covers 39 countries. A separate immigration visa pause covers 75 countries. If a legal immigrant from one of those countries here legally on a student visa, married to an American citizen, sponsored for a green card, goes home to apply at a U.S. consulate, as the memo particularly requires, the two Trump policies can combine to keep them outside the country indefinitely. That's not a deliberate design. That is a collision that nobody in the P6020199 addressed. Here's the part that nobody in the lamestream media is covering, and I needed you to understand exactly what the memo talked about before you can understand who wrote it and why this week is only the third chapter of a 7-month story. Joseph Edlow has been USCIS director since March 2025. In 7 months, he had signed 3 major immigration restrictions. Every outlet covering this week's green card story is treating it like a standalone announcement. It's not.
We shut down all final decisions for asylum to make sure that this could not happen again. We also have announced that we are pausing any adjudications of immigrant benefits and non-immigrant benefits for any individual from the 19 countries of concern that the president listed in his proclamation, his 212F proclamation, banning entry back in June. So we are taking decisive action. We're also going to review existing grants of permanent residence, of green cards for individuals that were granted in the last 5 years.
November 2025, Edlow pauses all immigration benefits for nationals in 19 high-risk countries and announces a review of green cards granted during the Biden administration. Early 2026, he releases a good moral character memo, changing how the USCIS evaluates naturalized applicants, requiring affirmative evidence of assimilation rather than just absence of a criminal record. May 2026, this week's adjustment of status memo. 3 pieces, sequential, each one tightening the system one section at a time. And Edlow built a public evidence base before each move.
We started with 1,000 targets, didn't know what we were going to find. We found fraud in every type of immigration benefits that we offer. And I'm so happy to see where this is taking us. And this is just, as you said, the first step. This is phase 1, going out in these Twin Cities, getting some information. Going back, we're going to be reopening cases. We're going to be working to denaturalize people. We're going to be working to deny benefits, get people removed. And ultimately, I'm working with the U.S. Attorney. We're going to get prosecutions here.
Joseph, do you have any sense of how many immigration fraud cases there are nationwide? If you extrapolate what you've discovered, say, just in the Twin Cities, that how many people are potentially deportable?
Well, listen, we started in Minnesota because we knew there was a hotbed of immigration fraud activity. So we wanted to go somewhere so that we could learn everything that we could before we take this on the road to other cities. All I will say is, based on what we learned, based on the levels of fraud that go well beyond anything that I expected, I think that it's almost immeasurable to try to guess how much immigration fraud there is in this country nationwide.
That's the sequence. Run Operation Twin Shield. Find the fraud in every category of benefit at levels beyond your own expectations. Announce it publicly, then tighten the process. Each piece justifies the next tier, and Ed Lowe is very specific in Congress about the whole operation and what it's designed to actually accomplish.
As Director of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, my vision has been straightforward and clear. Restore accountability to our immigration system and ensure that it serves the interests of the American people first and foremost. Today, I want to highlight some of our most significant accomplishments: ending the exploitation of immigration programs, putting American workers first, protecting our communities from public safety threats, protecting national security, and combating immigration fraud.
Before leading USCIS, Ed Lowe spent 2 years at the Heritage Foundation's Border Security and Immigration Center. The Heritage Foundation has been writing some immigration policy blueprints for years, and what Ed Lowe is doing is implementing not of new law, but of existing statutory authority that previous administrations chose not to use. Section 245 of the Immigration and Nationality Act has given USCIS discretion over adjustments of status since 1952. Ed Lowe didn't write that authority. He just started using it. And that's the part that makes this the most legally defensible of all three memos. Now, here's the question that matters most to people living inside this particular story right now. If you already filed the I-485 form, the adjustment of status application, before the memo dropped, what happens to you? What happens if you file this before? Are you grandfathered in the old process, or are you now subjected to the new one? Does the case get put on hold while the USCIS issues new guidelines? As of today, officially, nobody knows.
One person told me they are pretty sure people will be able to continue to apply for that green card status. But then there are other attorneys who were really concerned. They said that they've been getting many calls from their clients. Some of those clients are extremely alarmed. And they're talking about people who have family members here. There are folks who are working here in the United States. They may be married to U.S. citizens. They may be here on an H-1B visa where they're able to work. So pretty much they have set up lives here in the United States, and they're going through this process of applying for a green card. So they're now wondering, what is next for us?
Immigration law firms spent the weekend writing emergency client memos because of the PM 602099 applies clearly to new applications as it's silent on active pending cases. Ellison Law called it a gray area. The Cato Institute confirmed it. The USCIS has not issued a formal guidance on those 600,000 active I-485 files. When that guidance arrives, and trust me, it's coming, that's when you find out how many of those cases stay on track and how many get redirected outside the country.
When people apply for a green card, it's because they want to adjust their status. It's because they are trying to do things, quote unquote, the right way. And this is a way of attacking that process, of attacking immigrants.
My friends, here is both sides clean. The Trump administration says adjustments of status will always be a discretionary gift from the government, not a right. And the law has said so since 1952. Critics, on the other hand, will say 60 years of consistent government practices create a reasonable expectation, and changing the rules all of a sudden mid-application for hundreds of thousands of people of pending cases is fundamentally underlying the word unfair here to people who have followed every instruction USCIS has gave them. Truth be told, both of these are defensible positions. The story only makes sense if you hold both.
The requirement applies even to people who are in the country legally, regardless of whether they have spouses or children who are already U.S. citizens. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services says it will waive the requirement only under what they call extraordinary circumstances. Administration officials claim the policy reflects the original intent of the law. The change is likely to be challenged in court.
The court challenge has come in. Multiple attorneys confirmed it on record. And when it lands in front of a federal judge, the judge will ask one question first. Is adjustment of status a statutory right or statutory discretion? If it is defined as a right, this memo is overreached. If it's discretion and the law always written it as discretion, Ed Lowe had the full authority to do exactly what he did. The legal brief on both sides are already being written.
Border Patrol apprehensions along the southwest border totaled over 90,000 for the entire year. That's a number that used to represent a single month under the Biden administration. Daily encounters have dropped by 95%, averaging about 250 per day, compared to 5,000 a day during the Biden administration. Our increased enforcement also resulted in the seizure of over 617,000 pounds of illicit narcotics. That's nationwide, an 8% increase over the prior year. This included nearly 11,000 pounds of fentanyl and more than 186,000 pounds of methamphetamines. This is what having a secure border looks like.
Whether you think it's the right call, it's your decision, but that's what's happening. And this week's memo is the biggest single move inside the system since it actually started. America, here's what's not in any headline about this story yet. Extraordinary circumstances. 4 times in the memo, not defined single time once. Every denied application over the next 5 years gets appealed to a federal judge who will be asking to write that definition. And that litigation there doesn't cost days. It will cost years. And a court, not Joseph Edlow, delivers the final answer on those 2 words and what they exactly mean. That is not a prediction here, my friends. That is how American law has always handled undefined government criteria. And here's the frame nobody's putting on this, at least in my opinion. Kaler's second statement changes the question the government is actually asking. The old question was, did you follow the rules? The new question, written right into the second statement, is what do you bring? What do you bring into the country? 60 years of adjustment of status law was built in the first question. This memo is the first sentence of the answer to the second. Ed Lowe didn't need a new law. He used the authority that was already there. USCIS didn't close the door. They stopped pretending that the window was actually the door. Let me know what you guys think about this. Drop it down in the comments section down below. Smash the like button if you kindly would. Share, subscribe, and as always, guys, I'll catch you on the next one.